Talk to me. Talk to me.
Hello and welcome. I'm Dan Gersten, host of Chatting with History, where you can listen in to conversations I have with some of the most famous characters in the history of Western civilization. And today's guest is no exception. It's Michele de Nostradame, who's more commonly known by his Latinized name of Nostradamus. A French apothecary, doctor, and astrologer, he's famous for a collection of prophecies which many people have cited to predict major global events, especially the end of the world. So without further delay, let's meet Michele de Nostradame. Monsieur Nostradame, bonjour, and welcome to the show.
Oui. Merci, Dan. It's a pleasure to be here. And s'il vous plaît, please call me Mike. Michele sounds so feminine. And like that Beatles song, Michele, my belle. And Nostradame, or Nostradamus, tends to make some people think of moi as a hunchback. So please, call me Mike. After all, so many people want to be like moi.
Fine. Mike it is. Though I do have to tell you that wanting to be like Mike is about Michael Jordan and not you.
Sadly, I know this. In fact, I saw it coming.
You saw it coming?
Oh, oui. In fact, I became famous for seeing the coming of many things.
Like what?
Oh, mainly disasters like plagues, earthquakes, wars, floods, invasions, murders, droughts, and battles. Events which some believe are still happening today and which are yet to happen.
Plagues? Earthquakes? Wars? Didn't you predict any happy events?
A few, but not nearly enough. Personally, I wish I could have predicted the Mets winning the 1969 World Series, but sacre bleu, I picked Baltimore in 6.
Yeah, I didn't see that coming either, and I'm a Mets fan. So, why don't we begin by telling us of your childhood? You didn't see that coming, did you?
Funny, but no. I didn't see my birth coming, and I certainly didn't see my conception. Anyhow, I was born on the 14th of December. Maybe it was the 21st. It was in 1503 in Saint-Rémy-de-Provence, in, of all places, Provence, which is in the south of France. Mon père, that's father, was Germain de Nostradame, who was also known as Jacques. Mon mère, that's mother, was René de Saint-Rémy, who was also known as René. Mon père was a grain dealer and a notary. He thought that I am one of at least 9 children that my parents had. Delphine, Jean-1, Jean-2, Pierre, Hector, Louis, Bertrand, Antoine, and moi.
We're told that you're of Jewish ancestry.
That is true. On mon père's side. Mon grand-père, that's Dad's dad, Guy Garçonnet, converted to Catholicism around 1455, taking the Christian name Pierre and the surname Nostradame from the saint's day on which his conversion was solemnized.
But why?
It was a time of religious intolerance in France and throughout Europe. Catholics wanted everyone to be Catholic and distrusted other faiths. Plus, they had this notion that the Jewish people had killed Jesus. So it was either convert or leave France, or worse, torture, and death. The 1400s were not a good time to be Jewish in France.
Well, I mean, here it is, over 650 years since your grandfather converted, and anti-Semitism is still rampant throughout Europe, with France ranking as one of the most anti-Semitic nations on that continent.
Sadly, this is so, and I saw that as well.
Why don't we get back to your story? I mean, the early part of your life tends to be a bit cloudy, and there's some disagreement about it until you surface at the age of 15 when you entered the University of Avignon.
Oui, it's also cloudy to moi. Some believe I was tutored by my mère's mère, Jean Saint-Romé, and taught the rudiments of Latin, Greek, Hebrew, and mathematics. And some also believe mon Pierre's Pierre introduced moi to the ancient rites of Jewish tradition and the celestial sciences of astrology, giving moi exposure to the idea of the heavens and how they drive human destiny.
And again, at 15, you entered the University of Avignon, supposedly to study medicine.
Oui, so some reports say I was 14, but I was only there about a year, studying grammar, rhetoric, and logic before being forced to leave.
Forced to leave? Why? I mean, did you cut classes? I mean, did you get caught smoking dope or engaging in one too many panty raid?
Nothing of the sort. There was an outbreak of the plague, one of the most devastating pandemics, that's epidemic of an infectious disease, in human history. Also known as the Black Death, the plague reduced the world population from an estimated 450 million to somewhere between 350 and 375 million in 1300. And in the following centuries, there were major outbreaks throughout Europe.
In addition to killing almost a fourth of the world's population, I mean, the plague created a series of religious, social, and economic upheavals, which had profound effects on the course of European history.
Oh, oui. Some Europeans targeted such groups as Jews, friars, foreigners, beggars, pilgrims, lepers, and Roma, that's gypsies, thinking that they were to blame for the crisis. Why, some even thought that Jews were poisoning wells to cause the plague. As a result, there were many attacks against Jewish communities. In 1349, the Jewish communities of Mainz, in Cologne, in what is now Germany, were exterminated, and 2,000 Jews were murdered in Strasbourg. By 1351, 60 major and 150 smaller Jewish communities in Europe were destroyed. So you can imagine why my grand-Pierre converted, no?
Oui. I mean, yes. And as I noted earlier, anti-Semitism has existed in Europe for centuries and is never that far beneath the surface, I mean, even in 2013. Anyhow, the university closes its doors. Now what?
I basically traveled the countryside for 8 years, from 1521, researching herbal remedies and working as an apothecary.
An apothecary? I mean, what's an apothecary?
An apothecary is probably what you would call a pharmacist. In my day, it was a medical professional who formulated and dispensed medicines and remedies to doctors, surgeons, and patients. In addition, we offered general medical advice and some specialized services, and we experimented with herbs and chemicals.
Well, I mean, I guess I could have been an apothecary. I mean, having experimented with herbs and chemicals at one point. And anyhow, I mean, it sounds like you could have been a snake oil salesman.
Bah, not moi. But I know some people posing as apothecaries who, let us say, were ethically challenged and gave us honorable apothecaries a bad name.
So, I mean, it's 1529. You've been traveling and working as an apothecary. Now what?
Oh, in 1529, I entered the Université de Montpellier to study for a doctorate in medicine.
Now, I mean, there are some conflicting reports about this time in your life. I mean, one report is that shortly after entering the university, you were expelled when they discovered you had been an apothecary, a manual trade that had been expressly banned by the university statutes, and because they felt you had been slandering doctors. I mean, what was that about?
They had it coming. Just because a doctor has a degree in medicine doesn't make him a doctor. As I traveled around, I saw many doctors who didn't know their asses from their elbows, and I let them know this. As I look around today, I see the same thing. Doctors who care more about themselves and their money than their patients.
It should be noted that most accounts of your life, state that you were not expelled and received your license to practice medicine in 1529.
Ah, that is true. And it was at this time that I Latinized my name from Nostradame to Nostradamus, as was the custom of many medieval academics.
So, what did the new doctor do?
Oh, over the next several years, I again traveled throughout France, Italy, treating victims of the plague for which there was no known remedy, being treated with potions made of mercury, the practice of bloodletting, and dressing patients in garlic-soaked robes.
Well, that would have kept the vampires away. Anyhow, these treatments weren't for you, were they?
Oh, indeed, no. They were barbaric. Using my background as both a doctor and as apothecary, I developed what could be described as a progressive methods for dealing with the plague. I didn't bleed my patients, and instead I practiced effective hygiene, encouraging the removal of infected corpses from the streets. Plus, I created what was called a rose pill, an herbal lozenge made of rose hips, which were rich in vitamin C. These seemed to provide some relief for the patients with mild cases of the plague, and my cure rate was considered impressive, largely due to my keeping my patients clean, administering low-fat diets, and providing plenty of fresh air.
Supposedly, your approach to treating plague victims made you somewhat of a celebrity, and you received financial support from many of the citizens of Provence.
Oh, oui. Being a celebrity and having people provide financial support is always nice. Still, I would have preferred being famous for something not involving the death of millions, n'est-ce pas?
Yes. Though today it seems some people are getting wealthy off the death of thousands in war zones and scores of others in elementary schools, shopping malls, and movie theaters.
Oui, many of the predictions or prophecies associated with moi were about murders, wars, and death, which are caused by the greed and the evil of man.
Anyhow, in 1531, you were invited by Jules César Scaliger, an Italian scholar and physician, who some call a Renaissance man, to come work with him in Agen in southwestern France.
That is true. And while there, I married and had 2 children. Sadly, they all died in 1534 from the plague.
It is said that their dying caused you to fall out of favor in Agen and with your patron, Scaliger?
Perhaps, but Scaliger was an arrogant and vulgar man despite his intelligence, and it was good to leave him.
So, where did you go?
I traveled through France and Italy, and in 1538 I reportedly made some offhanded remark about a religious statue which resulted in charges of heresy against moi. So, to avoid a church inquisition, I took what might be described as an extended vacation. Oui, that's it, an extended vacation to Italy, Greece, Turkey, where I supposedly visited what were known as ancient mystery schools.
Yes. Some say it was on this trip that you experienced a psychic awakening, and that upon meeting a group of Franciscan monks in Italy, you identified one of them as a future pope, a man who indeed became Pope Sixtus V in 1585.
Maybe I did, and maybe I did not. Anyhow, in 1545, I felt as if I had stayed away long enough to be safe, and the Inquisition returned to France, where I assisted the prominent physician Louis Serret in his fight against a major plague outbreak in Marseille, and then in my own Salon de Provence in the regional capital, Hauts-de-Provence.
And in 1547, you settled in Salon de Provence, in a house that still stands today, where you married a rich widow named Anne Ponsard.
Ah oui, if you're going to marry, it's always good to marry rich. Together, Anne and I had 6 children, 3 daughters and 3 sons. Also around this time, I published 2 books on medical science, one a translation of Galen, the Roman physician, and the other a medical cookbook for treating the plague and the preparation of cosmetics.
We're told that once you began to settle down, that you started to move away from medicine and toward what best can be described as the occult.
Ah oui, I would spend hours in my study at night meditating in front of a bowl of water with herbs, which would bring on a trance and visions.
Yeah, I can relate. Back in the 70s, I was doing something similar, with water and herbs. Throw on a pair of headphones, turn off the light, turn on a light box that would pulsate to music and play a group called Yes. Talk about being in a trance and seeing visions.
What are you talking about?
Just reminiscent and feeling kind of hungry. So, you went into trances and saw visions?
Oui, and these were the basis of my predictions for the future. In 1550, I wrote my first almanac of astrological information and predictions for the coming year.
So, were you the Poor Richard of your time?
Again, what are you talking about?
Well, from 1732 to 1758, Poor Richard's Almanac was a yearly almanac published by Benjamin Franklin, one of the founding fathers of the United States of America, as well as an inventor, statesman, and publisher.
Ah, I see. Well, I wasn't poor, thanks to my rich wife, and my name is not Richard. But I became very popular, writing 1 or more almanacs a year. Taken together, they are known to have contained at least 6,338 prophecies, as well as at least 11 annual calendars.
And these almanacs got the attention of some prominent people and nobles outside of France, who soon started asking for horoscopes and psychic advice.
Oui, but in all honesty, I really wasn't very good at this, and generally expected my clients to supply their birth charts on which I could base my horoscopes and advice, rather than calculating them myself as more professional astrologer would have done. And when I was obliged to do this myself based on the published tables of the day, I always made numerous errors and forgot to adjust the figures for my client's place or time of birth.
Really? But didn't your clients wise up and realize you didn't know your astrology from your elbow?
Of course not. If they were smart to begin with, they would have not come to moi. Besides, there's always something in every chart that people can think is true.
By 1554, your visions had become an integral part of the almanacs.
Ah, oui. And in that year, I decided to channel all my energies into a massive opus I called Centuries, and which was to consist of 10 volumes, each containing 100 predictions, forecasting the next 2,000 years.
And in 1555, you published Les Prophéties, or the Prophecies, which contain the largely undated prophecies for which you are most famous.
Ah, that is true. But I wasn't so famous in those days. At least not in a good way, and my book received a mixed reaction. Some thought I was a servant of evil, while others thought I was a fake, or worse, insane.
Yes, but many of the elite thought you were spiritually inspired. I mean, especially since a number of your prophecies were rooted in the Bible. And Catherine de' Medici, the wife of King Honry II of France, well, she was one of your greatest admirers.
Oh, oui, she kind of had the hots for moi.
Really?
Oh, no, just kidding. But she was devoted to moi. Read my almanac in 1555, in which I hinted at unnamed threats to her family. So she summoned me to Paris to explain what I had wrought and to draw up horoscopes for her children.
Some say you predicted the death of King Henry II.
Perhaps. I prophesied that a young Leon would pierce the eye of an older one and he would die a cruel death. So I warned the young king that he should avoid ceremonial jousting.
And did he listen to you?
Hell no. Kings don't listen to too many people. And sure enough, 3 years later, when he was 41 years old, he died in a jousting match when an opponent's lance pierced his visor, entered his head behind the eye, deep into his brain. He held on for 10 agonizing days before he finally died of infection.
And after his death, your benefactor, now Queen Catherine, made you counselor and physician in ordinary to his son, the young King Charles IX of France.
That is true. It was a role I held until my death in 1566. I had been plagued by the gout for many years, and it was difficult for me to move about. Then, towards the end, it turned into edema, or was it dropsy? Either way, it was no fun.
It is said that in June of 1566, you had your lawyer draw up an extensive will, leaving much of your estate to your wife and children. And on the evening of July 1st, or maybe the 2nd, you allegedly told your secretary, Jean de Chavigny, that you will not find me alive at sunrise. Sure enough, he reportedly found you dead, lying on the floor next to your bed.
Ah, oui. I was reaching for the remote control, and it was beyond my reach, and splat. Next thing I know, I was on the floor. Guess I had fallen and couldn't get up. Really could have used one of those medical alert devices but they weren't invented yet. So I died. I was originally buried in a local Franciscan chapel in Salon and reinterred during the French Revolution in the Collège Saint-Laurent, where my tomb remains to this day.
Thank you for telling us of your life. You know, I'd now like to talk about your prophecies and your relationship with the Catholic Church. So, how would you describe your relationship with the Church?
Well, I was always mindful not to incur their wrath. Guess it goes back to my grand-père who converted from Judaism in order to save his life. So when I started writing my prophecies, I felt vulnerable to opposition on religious grounds. So I devised a method for obscuring my meaning by using Virgilianized syntax, word games, and a mixture of other languages, including Greek, Italian, Latin, and Provençal, a local dialect spoken by a minority of people in southern France.
And you put your prophecies in the form of quatrains, like the ones appearing in poems from the poetic traditions of various ancient civilizations, where the most traditional and common rhyme schemes are AAAA, AABB, and ABAB.
That is true. All told, in my prophecies, I supposedly wrote 942 quatrains, one unrhymed, and 941 that rhyme. The first installment was published in 1555 and contained 353 quatrains. The second installment was published in 1557 with 289 additional quatrains. The third edition, with 300 new quatrains, reportedly was published in 1558, but only survives as part of an omnibus edition published after my death in 1568.
Now, here's where there's a lot of misconceptions. Were the prophecies yours? Are you the originator?
Not really. A few may have been mine, but my inspiration was in ancient end-of-the-world prophecies, with most of them Bible-based. I supplemented them with references to historical events and anthologies of omen reports. And then I projected them into the future with the aid of comparative horoscopy.
Let me get this straight. What you're saying is that most of the prophecies attributed to you were not yours?
Oui, I never claimed to be a prophet, and in fact denied it in writing several times, including in a letter to King Henry II, where I wrote, "Some of the prophets predicted great and marvelous things to come, though for me, I in no way attribute to myself such a title."
And it should be noted that you entitled your book, The Prophecies by Monsieur Michele Nostradamus, as opposed to The Prophecies of Monsieur Michele Nostradamus.
No, we, except in a few cases, they were not mine, other than in the manner in which I edited and expressed them, and reapplied them to the future.
So, were you a plagiarist?
Moi? A plagiarist? Not moi. As I just said, my book of prophecies is by me, but the prophecies are not necessarily mine. Just the way that I presented them. That was moi. Kind of like a theatrical director restaging older material.
I'd now like to discuss some of your prophecies. Some of the prophecies you restaged. Most of the quatrains you're associated with deal with disasters, I mean, such as plagues and earthquakes. I mean, wars, floods, invasions, murders, droughts, and battles. And your fans, I mean, sometimes referred to as Nostradamus enthusiasts, have credited you with predicting numerous events in world history, including the French Revolution, the rise of Napoleon and Hitler, the development of the atomic bomb, and the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center in New York City.
Many of the prophecies are undated, which allows them to be applied to about just any time. And some of the quatrains cover disasters in overall terms, while others concern a single person or small group of people. Some cover a single town, while others concern several towns in several countries. Regardless, a large number of them were based on what is in the Mirabilis Liber.
Yes, and for our audience, the Mirabilis Liber is an anonymous and at the time very popular compilation of predictions by various Christian saints and divines that was published in France in 1524 and reprinted several times thereafter.
Oui, and like the prophecies attributed to me, it contained prophecies of fire, plague, famine, floods, earthquakes, droughts, comets, brutal occupations, and bloody oppressions. The church would collapse and the Pope forced to leave Rome.
You know, one of the reasons why your prophecies are of particular note today is because a major underlying theme of both the Mirabilis Liber and the prophecies is an impending invasion of Europe by Muslim forces from further east and south, headed by the expected Antichrist, a direct reflection of the then current Ottoman invasions and the earlier Saracen equivalents.
Oui, and the current rise of Islamic terrorist groups, the growth of the Muslim population in Europe from immigration, and the situation in the Middle East all give my end of the world prophecies new life, so to speak.
So, I have to come right out and just ask you, did you predict 9/11?
No. In fact, I am on record, again in a letter to King Henry II, as stating that my prophecies were about Europe, North Africa, and part of Asia Minor. They were not about the Americas or anything that might happen there.
Well, we've just about run out of time, and I'd like to thank you, Michele de Nostradamus, Mike, from coming on the show. As is customary, are there any parting words you'd like to leave with our audience?
Oh, but of course, Dan. To begin with, I am not a prophet. Never said I was, and there's evidence that I never thought of myself that way. Why people insist that I am is amazing, no? They are so desperate for some answers about the future, and they hate their life so much that they glom onto every prediction that the world's going to end, hoping that they'll be saved. Secondly, any prophecies I may have made or written were about Europe, North Africa, and the Near East. Those who attempt to apply these prophecies to the United States, like 9/11 or the death of the Kennedy brothers, are nothing more than boys calling wolf when there is no wolf. Lastly, I presented prophecies about terrible things, disasters, wars, the end of the world. But the thing that scared me most was none of these. It was the Catholic Church and Christians. I had to flee France and travel to Italy, Greece, and Turkey to avoid an inquisition. And why? because I made some remark about a religious statue. A statue? Mon Dieu! And then I had to couch the prophecies using a type of code so as to reduce opposition to what I wrote on religious grounds and to being accused of practicing magic or being an agent of the devil. And can you blame moi? My father's father had to give up being a Jew to save his life, and all because Catholics distrusted everyone who was not Catholic and believed that the Jews killed Jesus. Then, when the Black Death hit Europe, Catholics blamed Jews and other groups for it, even saying that Jews were poisoning wells to cause the plague, resulting in the destruction of Jewish communities and the death of thousands of Jews. Now, like I said, I am not a prophet, but I didn't have to be a prophet to have prophesied that anti-Semitism, hatred of Jews, would continue in Europe through the centuries, or to have predicted events like Russian pogroms, the Dreyfus affair in France, or the Holocaust. Why, even today it persists in Europe and elsewhere in the world. In Europe, neo-Nazi groups are widespread and gaining political recognition. Synagogues and Jewish cemeteries have been vandalized, and since 2000, anti-Jewish graffiti has increasingly appeared in Paris, Berlin, Madrid, Amsterdam, London, and Rome. In my own France, there were 614 anti-Semitic incidents in 2012 compared to only 389 in 2011. Now, while I am not a prophet, there are times when I wish I was one, and that maybe then I could see a future time when there is no more hatred of Jews or anyone. But alas, I am not, and I can only see more and more hate. Hopefully, it won't bring about the end of the world that so many people say I predicted. Sad.
Words of wisdom from Michele de Nostradamus, a French physician, apothecary, and astrologer, whom many believe could and did predict the future. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm with Mike in thinking he's not a prophet, just as he said, a restager of previous material. Still, I think he's right about the future in one regard, and that's until we learn to stop hating one another, the end of the world, by our own hands, is possible, and perhaps probable. So until our next Chatting with History, this is Dan Gersten, reminding all of you to practice more love for those different from you, and less hate. Thank you for watching.
Talk to me. Talk to me.